sirens, pledges of heaven's joy, spear-born harmonious sisters, voice and verse, wed your divine sounds, and mixed power employ. Dead things with inbreathed sense able to pierce, and to our high rays fantasy present, that undisturbed song of our pure consent, are sung before the sapphire-colored throng, to him that sits thereon, with saintly shout and solemn jubilee, where the bright seraphim in burning row their loud uplifted angel trumpets blow, and the cherubic host in 1,000 choirs touch their immortal harps of golden wires with those just spirits that wear victorious palms, hymns, devoting holy psalms, singing everlastingly, that we on earth with undiscording voice may rightly answer that melodious noise, as once we did, till disproportioned sin jarred against nature's chime, and with harsh din broke the fair music that all creatures made to their great Lord, whose love their motion swayed in perfect diapason, while they stood in first obedience and their state of good. Oh, may we soon again renew that song and keep in tune with heaven till God ere long. To his celestial consort we unite, to live with him and sing in endless morn of light. Our analysis. That song is referred to 3 times, all proceeding by the same demonstrative pronoun, the pure concent. Consent is like concord, it means consent, Latin. Consent, to which the hearer's attentions are raised as surely as has been pointed out, the celestial harmony, which in Milton's synthesis of Christian and pagan themes is prefigured by the music of the siren spheres, just as the latter is anticipated by actual earthly music. The undisturbed song of pure consent, it's like musical harmony, is also characterized by the pure consent, the agreement of its own component elements, text and melody. Milton's meditation on solemn music. Light's no good, huh? Solemn music. Its music is solemn. Its music is solemn, says Leo Spitzer, because it has the primeval aim of all Christian music, the religious elation, leads him almost at once to his underlying theme of the true, rational, eloquent music of both Greek theory and its adaptation in humanist musica speculativa. The strength of the continually referred to song as a perfect functioning union of voice and verse carries them over into the jar and din and discord of lines 17 to 24. The implication is that the ancient harmony of melody and text was broken by the act of disobedience that brought human history into lamented being. Aside from the harmoniousness of the perfect diapason, the great octave into which all creatures were cast by the moving power of divine love, it is almost as if all created life were being figured forth as moving, singing spheres themselves, such at any rate is the force of whose love their motion swayed in perfect diapason. But what is finally important here is that the, quote, fair music that all creatures made to their great Lord is the music of prayer, the solemn singing whose temporary reunification of divorce music and poetry is itself moving the poet to contemplation in the poem. Prayer since the fall must needs be a continually contrived process of work, in fact, of poetic art. It cannot be automatic and spontaneousness as once it was before disproportioned sin jarred against nature's chime. That song is perfect prayer, possible in a perfect world, imperfect world, only through the act of liturgical, poetical, musical devotion. The traditional lament of early Baroque musical aesthetics to the effect that the music of classical antiquity possessed the perfect reunification of text and melody, from which the corrupt modern bifurcation of musical and poetic concern was a long fall seems to lurk behind all this as a secular counterpoint, part of the Christian fall. And considering Milton's classical Christian synthesis, one might not be too far afield in suggesting that the celestial consort, from which all has fallen away, might have involved for him the union of text and music, of rational eloquence, and the cosmological operation of Christian grace, all mingled in a composite image. The high-raised fantasy of line 4 refers to, as Professor Hutton has pointed out, to the imaginative faculty of the soul that it meditates. In Christian Neo-Platonic thought, between the body and the intellect, he seems to miss the traditional use of high raise to describe the psychic tonus. Although the conventional metaphor of the tuned instrument is lacking here, the pure, clear invocation of the raising in pitch and altitude, intention, and moral power of the soul, or part of it, is not. The subject of the poem is certainly as much the public prayer of its title as it is the moralizing of the relationship between musica mundana and musica humana, occasioned by the hearing of some practical music. Unlike the contemplative, solitary, poetic treatment of the personal prayer, quote, at a solemn music, starts out with the fact of a high musical service, moves from it to account of its effects, as we noted above, returns to the biblical imagery of its immediate context and of the text of an actual anthem, and finally moves into the prayer for salvation. But it moves through the consciousness of a particular poet for whom the concerns of the responsibilities of the poetical role and the poetic gifts were to become monumental. The relationship of poetry to the devotion of the inner voice can be figured in the relationship between public and private prayer in a way, and Milton's personal engagement in the poem may be seen to appear in connection with this kind of comparison. The task of the poet was in the early 1630s at Horton, beginning for Milton to assume a course parallel to that of the poet, priest, shepherd, or, as we might put it, to that of the sacred composer, whose obligation it was properly to unite holy text and influential music. Thus, in a sense, At a Solemn Music raises its meditation over the condition of the listening poet as well. If the harmony of word and sound has been soured, the composer of liturgical music can provide short moments of sweetness, during which the pure, perfect source of all sweetness itself may be, if not glimpsed actually, then promised for eventual eternity. So may the poet, by employing his skill in unison with proper intention, approach the perfection of inspired eloquence of the psalmist himself. For that psalmist, music was the epitome of holy intercourse. We have seen how during the middle of the 17th century in England, the epitomization received either qualification or change of emphasis in its treatment by poets. Milton's combination of the praise of music, generally in the fashion of the previous century, with the figurative equivalents of song and prayer of the contemplative tradition, the whole, finally turned to a consideration of public prayer and public utterance, and it is not much the jarring of disproportionate human musica humana that is bemoaned, but a custom and practices, represents to some extent a synthesis of these conventions. In At a Solemn Music, Milton seems almost to be consecrating his life and his art to a purpose figured forth as a liturgical one. Like most of his young authors' subsequent productions in the next few years, it is an ambitious poem, and like them, its success seems all the more enhanced by its forward qualities. End of Milton. I think Milton is the super poet. Milton. Well, Milton got his due. We had read At a Solemn Music about Milton's poetry describing the harmony of the spheres. and the Untuning of the Sky, Ideas of Music and English Poetry, 1500 to 1700, with John Hollander. The Norton Library. Untuning of the Sky with John Milton.